3 days apart this July, China's two biggest AI labs went in opposite directions. On July 16th, Moonshot AI put the largest open-read model ever on the table. 2.8 trillion parameters, and the download lands inside 2 weeks. 3 days later, Alibaba answered with Qwen 3.8 Max, a smaller model with a bigger promise. One you can't download, benchmark or verify, and while the internet argued about leaderboards, my agent kept working on my Mac Studio, running on models nobody can meter, retire, or take back. So this is not the news recap, it's the build the news just made obvious. Open weight models just became the builder's default, and one score almost nobody is quoting proves it. By the end, the exact stack on my machine is yours. And there's one context setting that silently breaks your whole agent if you miss it.
Hey, I'm Johnny Null. I spent years building businesses the old hard way, managing teams, scaling operations, and doing everything manually. Today, everything I built, from automations and no-code infrastructures to fully AI SaaS products, has AI helping in one way or another. Firstly, let me quickly show you this. In South Africa, we call this a braai. I build with AI tools that, in my opinion, anyone can learn to use. My mission is simple: to help creators, entrepreneurs, and business owners get clarity with AI. Let's build smarter together and enjoy this video.
So before we get to the models, what's actually pushing builders toward open weights? Because the news alone doesn't explain it. If your agents run unattended, real work, overnight, nobody watching, the question is simple. Will the thing you built still work next month? Close providers keep failing that question. 3 different ways. Continuity first. OpenAI deprecated dozens of models across 2026, and the Assistance API the one agent builders depended on gets removed on August 26th. Weights you host on your own machine don't get retired out from under you. And that difference is the whole argument. Next, the metering ceiling. OpenAI's Tier 1 gives you 500 requests per minute on GPT-4o. Anthropic's free tier sits at around 5 requests per minute. Even the paid tiers have hard caps. Requesty documented them across providers. Hard rate limits are where unattended agent runs go to die. When your agent hits a wall at 2 a.m., there's no one to call. Then the terms keep shifting. Anthropic cracked down on unauthorized Claude usage in April, then reversed course a month later with agent SDK credits. And the newest closed frontier model this year shipped through a government review before the public ever touched it. A story I covered in a previous video. That's the backdrop. Open weights don't fix everything, but they fix the 3 problems that keep burning agent builders in the middle of the night. Now let's look at the models themselves. No marketing numbers, just what the benchmarks actually say. Kimi K3 from Moonshot AI. 2.8 trillion total parameters, roughly 50 billion active, 1 million token context window. Native vision. The largest open weight model ever announced. K3 hit number 1 on LM Arena's front-end code arena. 1679 ELO 76% win rate in blind human developer preference tests, according to Tom's Hardware. It also took the top spot on Automation Bench, Artificial Analysis's agentic workflow benchmark at 52.7%. But this is the part most coverage leaves out. On the overall Artificial Analysis Intelligence Index, K3 sits at number 3 with a score of 57. Behind Fable 5 at around 60 and a GPT-5.6 Sol at around 59. Moonshot themselves acknowledge this. The way I see it, factual reliability is the bigger concern for agent builders. K3's Omniscience Index score is 18. Fable 5's is 40, more than double. So on that index, K3's factual accuracy is significantly lower. For coding and agentic work, it's seriously impressive. But for factual grounding, that's something you plan around. Pricing lands at $3 per million input, $15 output via OpenRouter versus Fable 5 at 10 and 50. Roughly 3 times cheaper. Now here comes the critical detail. The weights are not released yet. They're promised by around July 27th. K2 shipped under a modified MIT license on GitHub, so we most probably see something similar. But until the drop actually happens, all we've got is the promise. So bear that in mind. Self-hosting is data center heavy, roughly 1.4 terabytes quantized, minimum 8 node cluster per a Hugging Face analysis. And the reasoning is always on. A quirk Simon Willison documented that matters for how we wire this later. So that's K3. Extraordinary at coding and agentic work, measurably behind on factual grounding and not yet on your hard drive. Let's move to the model you can actually build on today. NVIDIA shipped Nemotron 3 Ultra on June 4th, and the spec sheet reads like a statement. 550 billion total parameters, 55 billion active, up to 1 million tokens of context self-hosted. And guys, the license is the real story. OpenMDW 1.1 from the Linux Foundation. A permissive license adopted across the whole Nemotron family. That is about as open as licensing gets in 2026. Capability, straight up. On the same intelligence index, Nemotron 3 Ultra scores around 48, and GPT-5.6 medium sits at around 50. That's roughly mid-tier GPT-5.6 intelligence at about 1/7 the blended cost. 58 cents per million tokens versus $4.35. GPT-5.6 extended high scores around 60 on the same index and on Swebench verified. Nemotron's 71.9% sits well below Opus 4.8 at 88.6. It matches the middle of the closed frontier, not the top. And that's exactly the job we'll give it. What it does give you is room to build. A free account on NVIDIA's developer portal. Enough to prototype and test your agent. Exact limits in the economics section. The important part for builders, though, is the family. The Ultra itself needs data center class hardware nobody runs at home. But the family includes Nemotron 3 Nano, 30 billion total parameters, only 3.2 billion active. That runs on a consumer GPU. It runs on my Mac Studio through LM Studio and MLX right now. 21 to 87% higher throughput than Llama.cpp per Groundy's benchmarks. It's the piece that ties the whole stack together. Before we build one more model, the cautionary contrast. Alibaba previewed Qwen 3.8 Max on July 19th at the World AI Conference. 2.4 trillion parameters by Alibaba's own count, with the active parameters undisclosed, multimodal. Sounds impressive. But here's what it actually is today. Closed, API only, with open weights promised on no date, no license, and no repo. The claim that it's second only to Fable 5? That's Alibaba's own internal evaluation with zero published methodology, as Texi confirmed, and any coding benchmark circulating for 3.8 max is actually a 3.7 max number. A closed, unbenchmarked preview. 3 days after the rival open-sourced a bigger benchmarked model. That contrast tells you more than any leaderboard. Let's actually build the thing. Because guys, this is the point of the video. The frame I run is Hermes Agent, open source, MIT license, 70 plus built-in skills. And it runs my actual production work on the Mac Studio every day. The stack breaks into 3 tiers. Tier 1, a local model on your own machine for the always-on layer. That's Nemotron 3 Nano through Ollama or LM Studio, handling the background work that never stops. Scheduling, monitoring, and because it's local, there's no rate limit, no metering, and no API call that can fail halfway through an overnight run. Tier 2, hosted open endpoints for the heavy lifting. Nemotron 3 Ultra on NVIDIA's free developer endpoint, and K3's API for the agentic heavy jobs. API only until the weights drop. Tier 3, and this is the part most open weights videos skip, a closed frontier model for the hardest problems. Fable 5, GPT 5.6 Sol, whatever scores highest on the task. Let me quickly show you the wiring. Setting up the NVIDIA provider in Hermes is essentially one command. Hermes chat, provider NVIDIA, model Nemotron. Local models go through Ollama with a base URL pointed at localhost. And dude, the Nano model on MLX is actually quick. 3.2 billion active parameters means it generates like a 3B model. But the critical part most people miss, the setting I flagged at the start. Ollama defaults to a small context window, and Hermes need at least 64,000 tokens. Miss it, and your agent silently loses context. Garbage output, no warning. K3 has its own version of this. The reasoning trace must go back in full every turn, or the model breaks its own chain of thought. That's why K3 sits in the hosted tier, not local, and here's where this bites people. Hermes ships permissive by default. 9 CVEs on record from CSA Labs analysis. And I walked the full lockdown in the GPT-5.6 setup video. Why are the providers, permissions, and security files wrong? And that's how setups end up exposed. In the vault, we've already solved this. The Hermes OpenStack pack has the provider config files for these new open endpoints, the routing setup, the architecture files, and the complete security and permission hardening files. Everything to run Hermes locally the right way. Plus the community where we troubleshoot this live. The link is down in the description below. Alright, back to the economics. The free tier is a workshop, not a factory. 40 requests per minute on NVIDIA's community tier. 50 requests per day on OpenRouter free. Enough to build and test your agent. Not enough for production volume. Self-hosting. And honestly, this is where the bad advice lives. The break-even is not a weekend project. You need roughly 500,000 tokens a day before self-hosting actually beats API pricing, according to Digital Applied's 2026 deployment guide. Below that, the APIs win. And that's before the 3 to 5 times DevOps multiplier they documented. Salaries, model update cycles, infrastructure overhead. At low GPU utilization, your cost per token jumps roughly 10 times higher than premium API services, and where the capability matches. I want you to sit with this number. The UK AI Security Institute found that running the same cybersecurity evaluation tasks cost around $12.50 per task on Opus 4.5 versus 28 cents on DeepSeek 5.4 Pro. 45 times cheaper on comparable work from a government research institute, not a vendor's marketing page. The practical read for most of us. A local model for the always-on layer, hosted open endpoints for the 60 to 80% of daily work, and a closed API budget for the truly hard problems. That's the split. Now guys, before we call it, I need to give you the honest read against my own argument. I personally believe the channel's credibility depends on this. Epoch AI published in May 2026 that open models lag closed by roughly 4 months and 8 ECI points on average, slightly wider than the 3-month gap they measured in October 2025. A UK AI Security Institute study this month shows open models lag 4 to 5 months on narrow tasks, but on long horizon work to pull the kind agents actually need for sustained multi-step planning, the gap stretches to roughly 7 months. Here's what that means for builders. The absolute ceiling is still closed. Fable 5 sits around 3 points ahead of the best open model on the intelligence index. And for the hardest 20% of what your agent does, you most probably still need a closed model. I'd rather hand you that than pretend the gap is gone. In my opinion, the right architecture is open as your default, closed for the problems that genuinely require it. The same hybrid conclusion the 3-agent showdown forced on me last video. And that's exactly the split you just watched me wire. So here's what this comes down to. Leaderboards reset every month. What's on your own disk doesn't. And guys, I want to use an analogy from a world I know well. Building on rented API access is like releasing music where the label owns your recordings. You write the songs, you record the tracks, you build the audience. In the moment terms change, your catalog isn't yours. And suddenly the deprecation schedule, the rate limits, the terms, none of it is yours either. Wait on your own disk under a permissive license like OpenMDW. Those are masters you own. You decide when to update, when to retire a model, and you control the session. Closed models still matter. You rent the best studio for the hardest session. Fable 5 at 60 on the intelligence index on GPT 5.6, Sol at 59, they earn that premium. But the catalog, the foundation, the thing that runs every day, that lives with you. Big takeaways for me. Open weight models are no longer the backup plan. They are the substrate. The real gap is 4 to 7 months behind the frontier on the hardest tasks. But for the majority of daily agent work, open matches or beats closed at a fraction of the cost. And 2026 licensing, particularly OpenMDW, finally lets you build a real business on it. No outcomes guaranteed. Your context is your context. But the path is open in a way it wasn't 6 months ago. For the challenge, this lines up with everything I've been building toward. An agent stack where the core runs on models I control, on hardware I own, with closed access reserved for the moments that actually need it. The K3 weights drop is days away, and you can probably guess what happens on this channel when they land. Which model would you slot into your agent first? K3, Nemotron, or are you staying closed? Drop it down in the comments. I'll be reading through them. If you feel called to it, subscribe to follow the journey. And look, the vault has everything from this video. The provider configs, the security files, the architecture setup, the routing. The link is down in the description below. See you in the next one. Sources and references.